Are lessons really the most effective way to get better at golf? I've spent the past 2 years working with multiple different teaching pros trying to find out the answer to just that, and today I'll share what I've learned. Ask anyone how to get better at golf and the most common answer you will get is lessons. And it makes sense. Golf is a very complicated game, there's lots of different facets and nuances to it, and learning from a qualified professional is seemingly and most obviously the most direct way to improve your game. But is it really that simple? Over the past 2 years, I've worked with 3 different teaching pros, and they were all vastly different from one another in terms of their teaching methods, their philosophies, methodologies, the technology they use, the feedback they provided, etc. So I've had a suite of experiences, and it's given me a good understanding of what you can and can't expect to get out of golf lessons and how to build them into a holistic game improvement plan. So today I'm going to run through what I've learned, what my experiences have been like, and whether I would recommend golf lessons as the highest ROI method of improving your game. And just to add some variety to proceedings, I have set myself up on the 10th tee at Glen Eagles, which is a par 3, and I will be taking some shots throughout the video to keep things interesting and hopefully show off what I've learned. So my interest in golf, and in fact this whole enterprise that you lucky things are watching now, started with a golf lesson when I was given, basically completely out of the blue, 2 golf lessons as a birthday gift by my partner just about 2 years ago now. So my initial lessons were that of a complete beginner, lots of fundamental things around grip and stance and posture and basically the mechanics of the golf swing from absolute ground zero, starting with almost no knowledge at all. There was no camera, there was no TrackMan, there was no launch monitor, there was no anything like that. And it was good. Credit to him, he got me hitting a ball more often than not in vaguely the right direction, and certainly enough for me to realize almost immediately that I basically had fallen in love with golf and wanted to continue playing it. On that very first lesson, I hit an 8-iron like I dreamed of hitting one, absolutely pure contact, and it was pretty much at that moment that I knew this was something I was going to pursue.
I'm going to devote my life to this. Every weekend, for the rest of my days, I will be here.
So I had about 6 lessons with him early on just to get myself moving and get myself confident enough to go out onto the course, and certainly I was able to do that. And again, credit to him, he took me from basically knowing nothing to breaking 100 in only my 3rd round out there and shooting kind of scores in either the low hundreds or the high 90s within a few months of starting. What I would say is that there were definitely some gaps in my learning at that point, possibly just it was the coach not wanting to overload me with information, but there was nothing really taught to me about ball flight laws or anything really mechanical. It was much more about feel, just about contact, and really the primary thing that he taught me was about weight transfer. So there was lots of analogies about throwing a ball or throwing a punch, at least I think they were analogies and he wasn't just angry with me, and about getting my weight through the ball. And that was a good thing. Obviously, being able to transfer weight is an important part of the golf swing, but I would say that those missing pieces around things like swing plane and ball flight did leave me floundering a little bit. Having that focus on weight transfer also got my swing very in to out, so I developed quite a mean hook quite quickly, and the only real solution I was given was to weaken off my grip, which for me didn't really work at the time. But as a first experience, it was definitely a good one. As I say, it took me from 0 to something to being able to get around a golf course without being totally embarrassed, and that was what I needed at the time. The next set of lessons I had was probably around a year into my golfing journey. So I'd had that initial block of lessons, and then I had a fairly significant gap before I started seeing a new teaching pro. And this was probably the most complex golf lesson experience that I've had so far. So first things first, it very much opened my eyes, or in a couple of ways. It was the first time I'd ever seen my swing on camera. And that really was a slightly ghastly experience, particularly when it was thrown up against pro swings to compare positions and movement patterns and things like that. So I hadn't ever seen my swing on camera up to that point, and I didn't realize that I had developed, or not even developed, that I had just fallen instinctively into a massively inside takeaway, completely losing my right elbow early on in my swing, and then coming over the top, which I know is a fairly common pattern for new golfers, but I just had no idea. So I was slightly aghast when I saw myself on video. And the other thing that was very interesting was it was the first time I'd ever been put on a launch monitor. So the pro I was seeing had a TrackMan, so I was able to see lots of data on ball flight and club speed and distances, and in particular impact location. And I realized, or he showed me very early on, that my impact tendencies were very much towards the heel of the golf club. So I had an inside takeaway, an over the top swing, and a heel biased strike pattern, which is not a fantastic combination, and explained a lot of the issues I'd been having with inconsistency and slicing and just not being able to control the direction of my shots in particular. So from there we started working initially on that takeaway, trying to get it much more on plane. And then there were certain things that we moved towards, some of which I'm still working on now, but in a different way, and I'll come to that. So limiting the length of my swing, because it has a tendency to go very long. One of the reasons for that is I don't necessarily have a full shoulder turn. And certainly I felt like each time I had a lesson, I was hitting the ball better by the time I left than when I started. However, I started to feel a little bit like it was Groundhog Day golf lessons, because I'd go in, we'd do some stuff, we'd move it forward, I'd leave, I'd work on it at the range, and I'd come back in and we'd move on to something either completely different, or we'd do something which to me seemed to go counter to that which we just learned. So the takeaway is a good example of this. I spent honestly months grinding on my takeaway, filming my swing, trying to get it not inside, trying to get it into that good P2 position. And then sort of 3 or 4 months later, we were working on something which was bringing my takeaway back inside. And when I questioned it, I was told we didn't care about the takeaway anymore. So I found it quite confusing. And I think one of the issues I had, and this is absolutely my failing and not the failing of the coach, is that I just didn't like the way it felt, and I didn't really like the way it was making my swing look. I know that swing aesthetics and chasing them is not the be all and end all, and sometimes is a complete fool's errand, but I just wasn't happy with the direction my swing was moving in. And frankly, my scores were moving in the wrong direction as well. And that was obviously far more important. My handicap had started to creep up. I think I was an 18 when I started having those lessons, and it went up just bit by bit to a 19. And although I could throw in the odd good round here and there, it wasn't good enough, and it just wasn't, I wasn't seeing progress. So I gave it 5 to 6 months and then ultimately ended that relationship. And that brings us to present day, or certainly to the present golf coach that I am seeing now and have been seeing for around 5 months. And I would say this combines, to me at least, from my experiences so far, the best of both. It's outside grass driving range, and a lot of it is looking at the shots I'm hitting into targets, but it's also combining a lot of video and a lot of more of the mechanical swing fundamentals that, as who I am, I tend to gravitate more towards. We have ended up working on a lot of the same things that I was working with my second coach. So he identified a whole slew of things which were more or less exactly the same. So takeaway, length of backswing, shoulder turn, hip sway, etc., etc. But ultimately, I have found the ways in which we're going about tackling them much more consistent. And I think for me, as someone who's looking to get better over the long term, rather than just, I want to hit it better this week, feeling like someone had a structured plan from the off has been huge. In that first lesson, we had a long conversation about where my game was at, where I wanted to get to, how much practice I was doing, how much practice I was willing to do, what my aspirations were for kind of 6, 9, 12 months down the road. And that very much factored into a cohesive plan. And I could see and was told from the off what we were going to be doing more or less month by month from then until the start of the season, coming up fairly soon, and then beyond that as well. So that gave me a lot of solace. It gave me a lot of comfort to know that someone was taking my progression seriously, someone was taking the long view with me, and that we were putting building blocks in place. Now, it's not always been smooth. I think I made some very early progress, which was encouraging. My handicap nosedived from 19 to where it is now, pretty much 14 and a half within about 6 or 7 weeks. But the lessons started to progress a little bit more quickly than I could. Finally managed to nail the takeaway, and then managed to get a couple of other pieces in place, which were helping my direction. But ultimately I wasn't able to put some of the things into place as quickly as the lessons were going. So I had to just hold my hands up and say that, rewound, and have slowed things down since. So we're now working still on that length of backswing and very much on the hip sway. And once we can get that dialed in, then hopefully we can continue to make forward progress. I think ultimately for me, do golf lessons help? Yes, absolutely. But there's a couple of caveats to saying that they are the most effective way to get better at golf. One is that you need to find a coach who works for what you want in your game, both at the time, but also over time. If you're going to book in multiple lessons with the same coach, you want to know that they have a plan for you and they're not just going to be fixing whatever fault is present that day. Because golf is so variable that what happens that day may not be happening the following day or the following week. So it's more about putting long-term sustainable improvement in place rather than just firefighting day to day. The other thing is just find someone whose methodology and whose feedback works with what you want. So whether that is a launch monitor or video or whatever it might be, find someone who's going to give you that. The coach I work with now uses an app, and every lesson we have, a few hours later, he sends through video of what we worked on that week, and he sends through drills and things that he wants me to focus on from that lesson to the next. So that is super clear, gives me something to work on, gives me something to focus on next time at the range, and then I can take that forward with me. And then crucially, it's something that can't be done in isolation. The lessons are great, but ultimately it's an hour every 2, 3, 4 weeks maybe. And so if you're not supplementing that with practice on the range or at a sim or even just getting out onto the course enough, things aren't going to stick. It took me literally 9 months to get my takeaway into a position I was happy with, and that was grinding in between lessons, and it still wasn't happening, and it really did take a very long time. So unless you're going to commit to the practice side of things, which is going to be in a video coming very soon, the lessons will only go so far. Yes, they are absolutely effective, and yes, they are absolutely almost a must, I would say, for anyone who wants to get meaningfully better at golf, but they aren't going to do it on their own. Do they have a positive ROI in terms of the time and effort spent? If you find the right coach, then absolutely yes, but I would say they are a piece of the puzzle rather than the whole puzzle in themselves. Guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope you are enjoying the game improvement series. There are lots more videos to come around practice, equipment, physical training, books, podcasts, etc. So please do subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video if you'd be so kind, and comment to let me know what you think about golf lessons and what your current game improvement strategies are.